Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon again. Welcome to day 3. We've covered a lot in the last 2 days, going from knowing nothing about this tool to suddenly exposure to this automation solution and starting to run forms through it. So just given the training last week, I just wanted to, or on Monday, should I say, wanted to take a moment just to talk again a little bit about Kobo form management. Now that everyone's had a chance to do this once, make sure everyone feels good about it, how to get their forms in there, how to identify your identifiers to then run it through the solution. And just want to walk through that solution again through the start of the session. So giving you folks a chance to also practice a little bit, ask some additional questions and just talk about some additional flags. So feel free, especially for this first part, to put your hand up or just jump in with questions. But then the second part of today, we're going to focus a little bit more on just generally like integration design and really trying to understand, you know, what is going on with this tool open function. Like we've been talking about very technical things. But integration design and this process of what we call data element mapping. So trying to translate data points that you're collecting into one system and mapping them or assigning them to another system. It's, you know, it helps if you're familiar with technology, certainly if you're familiar with data, but it doesn't have to be a very technical exercise or a very developer exercise. And so while with the automation solution, we're working in this open function environment, that the goal is that it should be fairly easy for you all, even if you don't know anything about code, about databases, anything like that, to still, if you understand Kobo, can get that form up there. You can run that form through the solution. And then if you wanted to customize that solution or even think about setting up your own open function jobs to map your forms to a very specific data model or another database you're working on, we're going to talk about that initial design and planning process today. And again, that number 3, that's usually a process with folks that are consuming the data or are very familiar with the data. It's not usually a developer exercise. And it's really just about understanding, you know, what data is being collected, what is the shape of that data, how does that map to the other metadata in your system that you're hoping to connect with. And just really providing some analysis into what type of assignments and transformations we want to make to ensure that when we extract information from the first system, it makes it over successfully to the second system. And it shows up in that second system in a way that is meaningful and translates meaning from whatever that language is in the first system to the second system. So that way that consumer in that second system can understand that data, that information. So we're going to talk about that translation process for the second half today. Great. So I'm going to keep going here. But again, I had some weird screen sharing things when I was flipping to Kobo. So please type up if suddenly you don't see my screen. And feel free to jump in with questions as well for the first part. But I'm going to pull up Kobo Toolbox again in a moment. So if you all want to either pull up your own Kobo Toolbox or if you want to log into the training account, the credentials are here on the screen. And again, we can be looking at our forms or you can be uploading your own forms, which I'll talk through again, just to recap that process for folks, as well as we can talk a little bit about what other additional checks we need to make. Because even from last session, I was seeing a couple errors popping up when we were trying to sync some of those forms. So I just want to walk through a few extra steps to just make sure those forms are set up properly before we run them through this automation solution. So does everyone have Kobo up or something? If not, just holler in the chat and myself or Rita can help and make sure that you all get that set up. But can you still see my screen with Kobo? Yes. Okay, awesome. Great. Well, just to recap, when you log into Kobo Toolbox, you get this project space and you have a user, and your user is the owner of any form that you upload to this Kobo project space. So I'm currently logged into the WCS training project. So you might see that over here on the right. I got the little W icon. But I can see here in my list of forms that there's a number of forms going on here. There's some that are shared by other users. So James, I just see you shared one with me, which is great. And then some I can see without anything that's from mine, and some are maybe pulled from different libraries or public connections. So even if you're working on your own Kobo project and you're collaborating with other folks, you can still always share forms. And that's a nice way if you have one Kobo account connected to OpenFN and this OpenFN solution, that's a really easy way just to manage, have like kind of one administrator user where all of your partners or colleagues are sharing forms to. So that way you can then grab those forms and run them through the solution. So if you ever wanted to share a form, it's quite straightforward. You can click in and you can click on the right share project. You just need to know that other person's Kobo username in order to make it when you share. And just be mindful when you're sharing what type of permissions you're giving. So I think Matthias brought this up on the call yesterday. You can share just the form, and we need just the form to run this automation solution and generate this database because we're reading that form metadata. But you can also choose to share submissions. So you might do that if you want to then sync the data through OpenFN. And I imagine if you're using the form to spin up a database to capture the data, you probably also want to sync the data. So then there's varying levels of submission access here. So just be mindful of that whenever you're sharing, who you're sharing with, and how you're sharing. So if you all want to run some solutions today through the automation solution, we are using this WCS training project. So if you give us view form access, we can at the very least read the form. And if you want to share, maybe you have a form with some sample submissions, like test submissions, you can also share that, and then we can also sync some of that data. So that's what's going on with forms, form ownership, form sharing. Any quick questions here? Okay. The other thing to note is, again, when you set up a form, you can click new, you can build from scratch using point and click, you can use a template, you can upload an XLS, which, as we learned, if you're using ODK, it seems like that translates quite well. There's also lots of documentation on Kobo for how to build forms. So you can like build them out in Excel and then upload them here. And I know Diane and Charlotte and a few of the other ConSoSci members have put together some really wonderful materials on form building and all that. And there's a lot to learn there. So definitely encourage you all to check that out. Some of the links are already on that key concept sites of the documentation. But you can also look for forms in that public library. So what we quickly talked about last time was in public collections, there are different template forms you can use. So ConSoSci has this whole library of Kobo forms you might borrow. And if you go through there and if you find a form you like, you can either clone that form and, oh, let me go back. There's that little copy icon here, clone that form and then copy it over to your library. Or you can download the XLS, so that'll give you the XLS version of that form. And when the Kobo form is downloaded in Excel, I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let me know if you can see. Excel is opening up on my screen now.
No, we're still on your Kobo account.
Can you see now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. So this is going to be relevant a little bit later. But if you download your form to XLS, this also allows you to really quickly peruse the anatomy of a Kobo form. And this gives you a little bit of insight into how this data is structured. So if you've used Kobo before, or if you use ODK, this will be very familiar to you all. But generally, a Kobo form centers around types. So different data types. We have some standard like date fields. We have some geolocation or geopoint. We have select one or like drop down options. We have image fields. we have this thing, what we call repeat groups, where again, it allows us to group a question. So for example, if I'm surveying someone and I know they have many boats, I might want to ask about those boats many times. So we have those repeat groups, integers, all these different data types. So there's lots of documentation on the Kobo site just around those available data types, and the open function documentation as well in terms of how these different data types translate to a database. So for example, integers also show up as integers in the database, text as what we call varchar, column type. So check out the documentation for a little bit more insight there. But the second column here, this is the actual name of the Kobo question. And this is what we see when we access the Kobo form through the API, which is what we're doing in OpenFunction. And these names are unique kind of code versions of the questions. So on column C, we have labels, and you might have different question labels for different translations. And those question labels provide like a full, very user-friendly, readable question. And this is what a user on Kobo actually sees and reads if they're collecting data. So if I'm collecting data, I might say, hey, are you surveying a land site or market? But that's a really long question. So on the back end, we just capture this question with the question name survey. And so every question that you're capturing, every data collection point you're capturing, you're going to both have labels as well as actual names. And that allows you to maintain translations, but it allows you to also have one unique name per question. And this is also ultimately what we're referencing when we're mapping this data to another database. So if someone ever asks you, hey, where is the information for this question? Make sure you know, and you can go and you can find that question name to see what that looks like. Any quick questions here? Okay, one other thing to point out is if you have one of these select question types, you see you're giving users like a list of options to choose from in the mobile phone. So select which country. In the Kobo form, you'll see there's this choices tab. And if I take a look at the list name for country, these are my different country options: Kenya, Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania. So another important thing to flag is that not only questions, but also choices have both labels and names. And so again, when we're integrating this data, when we're mapping it to another system, we see whatever is coming in on the name side. We don't see whatever this label is. So if the label is different than the name, this is something that you'll want to keep in mind, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but these are the coded values that we're going to get back from Kobo. And if you want to see the labels, we might need to do this translation step later down the line. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but just something for y'all to keep in mind is that for both choices and Kobo questions, there are both names and labels, but names are what we're dealing with when we can extract the information through the API and integrate it. Cool. So if you have your Kobo forms and you have them uploaded here on your Kobo project, what are a couple things that we talked about to make sure that your Kobo form will run smoothly through the automation solution? Does anyone remember a couple of those considerations that we talked about the last session?
There was something about making sure the names are short.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Shorter, and why would that be the case, James?
It was to do with the file name structure and how it all kind of links together, and otherwise you end up with these huge, like, unwieldy path names, I think, or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we're taking these question names, and they become columns in our database, and the group names, also how we group questions, that also can sometimes define tables if we're having related data. So if you have really long question names and group names, then you're going to have really long table names. And so this is where when you're building your Kobo forms, we really encourage you all to keep your names short, descriptive, so you know what it is, but also try to keep it unique. So that way you know, okay, this name corresponds to this question specifically. And so this is where there's a little bit more extra thought of when you're building a data collection form. If you're going to plan to integrate it, just keep in mind that whatever names you're setting, that's ultimately going to be automated into metadata for your destination system. So this again does not apply to labels. You can have really long questions that are worded exactly how you want. But when it comes to the names itself, think about that. That's what we're going to be dealing with when we talk about the question in an integration context or when we're configuring a database to capture that question. Any questions there? And then the other consideration, Kobo forms cannot begin with an integer or contain any special characters. And this is again, just because of some limitations in the database. If you're setting up a database table, they don't allow us to have weird characters like periods, commas, dashes, or lead with numbers. And so we have a couple of examples there on the screen. But if you're about to integrate a Kobo form, just do a quick check that you don't have any of those special characters there. And then it should integrate smoothly. We have tested and accents are fine, so language friendly, but it's just with these kind of special punctuation marks and with leading integers where we tend to run into problems. So those are the main considerations. One other one that came up on the call or on Monday when we were doing a little bit of testing is you'll see in Kobo when you upload a form. So for example, if I upload the XLS that I had just downloaded, it allows me to specify the name of my form. I can provide a description if I want, things like that. But then when I create that form, it's going to give me this little alert that if you want to make changes to public, you must deploy this form. So you'll see that this button is still not deployed. So if I go back to my list here, I can see my new form is in this draft section. So the other thing just to keep in mind is if we're going to run these forms through the automation solution, we want to make sure these forms are deployed and active. And what that does is it allows us to explore, I guess, access the Kobo survey through the API. So if you've uploaded a new form, just be sure to click deploy. And interesting, getting an error from this form I pulled from ConSoSci. So Diane, maybe I'll message you later to check that out. But when you click deploy, what that will do is it shows up in this deploy category. So here you can see we have these 5 different forms here. And then we're ready to start running it through the automation solution. So we're going to repeat that process in a moment. But any quick questions on form uploads, form deployments, Kobo questions, names and labels?
So I don't have a question, but there is a really useful website to check the XLS forms. That's actually an ODK website, but works also for Kobo. I'll put the link in the chat. But yeah, it gives much better messages than the one that you just had on Kobo. It's should be that one. And oh no, let me find it. But it gives you exactly where the problem is, and it works for both, for any XLS form. So that's really useful to check your form before uploading it, before deploying it.
Okay, nice. So I can check that out after the training and see maybe what went wrong with that one specific Kobo form. Awesome. And James, maybe that could be a step for if you're transferring ODK forms, just to make sure that they check out as well. But I guess if you're already running them on ODK, it's probably fine. Cool. Then just a reminder as well as, once you start submitting data, where that goes is it starts being added to your form under this data section. So if you're working with data managers, they can come into data, they can check out the table, and this is where they can monitor submissions coming in. They can also click this pencil icon to be editing, and there's also options to download to Excel and make changes there. But remember that when folks are editing via this interface, it does update the submission. And this is why usually when we're syncing data from Kobo to another system, like a database, what we'll do is we'll sync it the first time the submission comes in. So maybe we have an OpenFN job asking for new submissions every hour, but we'll also ask for submissions that have been updated a lot of times, just to make sure that, if any data cleaning happened, that we're pulling that latest version of that submission as well. But the nice thing is, at least here in this interface, you can do some of that basic management, some of that basic auditing, but then OpenFN can be set up in a way where it's always pulling the latest, so you have the updated data. But there are ways to configure it as well, so you could get snapshots of that data. So if that was important to you to see the data in its original state and then to see later what it was cleaned, that you can also configure OpenFN in that way to be archiving that data. So that way you can see it at those different stages. So just some things to keep in mind there. But I'm going to go ahead and flip back to my PowerPoint. One other quick tip, if you're using Kobo for the first time, is if you've uploaded a form, or right now you're borrowing a form, downloading it from the ConSoSci library and uploading it here. If you wanted to submit test submissions, you can either download the mobile application for Kobo Toolbox, and you can download the application, sign in with your user, and download the form and start collecting data that way. But if you're testing your form, you can also preview it here, if you see this little preview option, as well as collect data. And I think ODK has something very similar if you used ODK before. But if you collect data, you can see here there's this collect data section in the bottom, and there's an open option. And what it will do is in the browser, it's going to pull up this web browser view where then you can actually fill out the form submissions that will get synced back to the Kobo server. So a lot of times if you're building a new form, it's sometimes really helpful to just fill out a couple submissions just to make sure your form looks good. And then that also gives you some data to work with if you're setting up this integration and to test through the integration, and just make sure that the integration is set up in a way that it can support this data and these various responses as you're filling it out. So if you're kind of working with us on this now, we're going to walk through a couple of examples with some of these forms. But I encourage you all that if you haven't already, maybe share a form with WCS training, go find a form from the library, or maybe just create a new one really quickly in this training account. And then that way we can practice running it through the automation solution. So now I'm going to flip back to my deck and quickly recap what we talked about with the automation solution. So anyone, what are some good use cases for the solution? And any that you're seeing in your organization, like when is this a good fit for someone?
So I think from WCS's side, we're planning to a larger extent to use this to create the initial setup that we will tweak slightly. So we will go into the custom quite a lot, but this will also be useful, where somebody has a set of forms that we think we may generalize and make available across the whole organization, and we want to spin something up quickly. It will allow us to spin it up, use a prefix that indicates it's a prototype, and rapidly deploy a solution. So we have it, instead of taking 4 or 5 days to get the data from Kobo into our database. This basically means we can do it almost immediately.
Awesome. So taking the solution, running the form through there, generating a database output, and a open function job as a template to then expand upon, and still very quickly get these forms and the integrations out the door. Anyone else? Any other use cases that you see? Maybe if you're not customizing it. Well, I think another good use case that, if the solution had in mind too, was folks that maybe don't have that database system, remember? So if you don't have that data system, you're collecting information in Kobo and you do want to quickly get it into a somewhat structured way, this is going to give you something a lot more structured than a Kobo CSV export, which is going to give you 1 row per form submission. This, at the very least, is going to give you a set of relationships and tables. So if your organization's used to running queries or plugging in tools like Power BI or Tableau or something like that, that will hopefully give you a little bit more structure to your data just to fast track that analysis. And how this works again is the open function, what it's doing is it's first just setting up both the database metadata as well as the connection. So first we're just analyzing not the data itself, but the structure of the data in the Kobo form. So again, if you're using this solution, it's really helpful if you are familiar with the Kobo forms that you're working with, because then you'll have a better understanding of what the output is that you can expect. So within a form, you might have a standard set of questions that you ask for every single submission. Then depending on certain answers, you might be asking repeated questions again and again. So if I'm collecting information on sharks and rays, I want to know specifically what happened with certain boats, what types of boats, how big is the crew, when they went out and they caught different species. And then I want to know about all of their different catches. That's when we use this repeat group, which is this phrase that you'll hear a lot in the Kobo and ODK communities, but it's a way of grouping questions and asking them repeatedly. And usually what that translates to then is where you have a relational database with one and many relationships. So you have one form with many boats that you might be interviewing, or you might have one household survey and many household members that you're interviewing. So whenever you kind of have that one instance of data collection, but capturing information about multiple entities, that's where you might start to see these one-to-many relationships pop up. And that's where, if you set up those repeat groups in a way, OpenFunction is going to automatically read that Kobo form definition and translate that into a database output. So that's the default structure. And you'll also see that there is this Kobo data table at the top. And as part of the solution, any form that you sync will have a record inserted in that Kobo data table. So that way this Kobo data table becomes this master table in your database that is collecting information on all the different forms that you might have synced. So if you're managing hundreds of forms, then you can go to Kobo data to see, okay, what forms am I actually actively syncing to the database? Where did those tables live? And a second phase of this that's currently in development is actually building out a whole data dictionary as well to really catalog, where did these forms come from? What do these forms look like? What questions were in the forms? And so that way in the database itself, you can see what was captured in Kobo and really understand those question names and those column names without having to leave your database. And so that way we can really get that form definition as well as the data out of Kobo and just put it in this one central system that you might be using for analysis, or put it into multiple systems that you might be collaborating on with different folks there. So any quick questions, just again on a high level on how it works, how some of the configuration works? I think for really detailed questions like what data type, stuff like that, I encourage you to check out the documentation, but happy to pause quickly here.
I have a question about the different types of Kobo accounts. So there's 2 types of accounts that each use a different server. One's a humanitarian account, and another one seems to be kind of like a regular account. They're both free. I know in Kobo, if someone creates a form in one account, they can't necessarily share that form and the data with someone who has another type of account because they're using different servers. Will OpenFN, though, work with both types of servers from each type of account?
It will, but you might have to have two parallel integration processes to connect with each server, because the server has like a different address that you'll be pulling from. So OpenFunction may not be able to kind of pull from across the places. I think even some of the API URL that we go and we ask for that data is slightly different, but certainly possible. Diane, do you all have any recommendations on your side of like how you've advised folks to do that, at least in WCS?
To use the two servers of Kobo?
Yeah, does that happen at WCS as well?
No. We try to stick on the researcher server.
Yeah, Dan, do you want to just summarize which server we recommend, why we recommend it?
Yeah. Well, the first, I mean, initially we decided to go on the researcher one because we thought that WCS didn't fall under the humanitarian category, and that we also saw that the limitation on the researcher server is not really a limitation. I mean, we never reach any of the storage limitation that there is on the researcher server. We can have as many accounts, user projects as we want. And so then when we started using the researcher account, we just made sure that everyone stick there so that we could share projects, forms between all the WCS accounts.
And one other consideration that we'll talk about a little bit later today is when you create a submission, so when you submit data, Kobo assigns an identifier to that answer, that submission. And those identifiers are unique across one server, but Kobo doesn't guarantee that it's unique across both servers. And so you can still pull from data from both servers, but just something that you might have to specifically think about is, if I'm pulling data from both servers, I might need to construct some sort of additional identifier to make sure that in case two submissions come in from two different servers and they happen to have the same submission number, you recognize that they are unique, they're from different servers rather than the same exact submission. So that's just one other consideration if you're using the same forms on two different servers. But we'll talk a little bit more about unique identifiers later today.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. I think then if we're deciding, since this is kind of a collaborative and we're deciding to choose one, the research type Kobo form, then we want to make that more clear at the beginning, just in case somebody accidentally already kind of invests a lot of the time, but uses a humanitarian server, then, unfortunately, there wouldn't be an easy way to kind of, take what's already been done and just transfer it. So I'm going to go ahead and change, since we don't have too much use and we don't have any active forms in the WWF Kobo account, I'm going to go ahead and switch to and just create an account in the research type account, because I realize it'll make it much easier. But as long as we make that clear, then no one else would have to kind of go through that switch either.
Sounds like great feedback. Thanks for flagging that. Awesome. Great. So if you all remember this screen, this is what your ConSoSci project looks like when you first log in. There's a lot of different things going on, and when you're building your own integration, you might just be dealing with one job for one form. So again, a job being that set of rules or instructions for mapping a set of data. But because we are generating jobs and we are generating database outputs, it requires a little bit more power. So we have a couple jobs here going on for this solution. And you'll see that they're labeled in a certain way in this ConSoSci account. And so if you're using the solution, what you might have is five jobs as a default to start with. So you have your first one that we're interacting with to go and fetch that data from Kobo. We have the second one that's doing this analysis to figure out what do I do with this Kobo form that I just fetched. Then we have this third job that is creating other jobs that you can actually run on a day-to-day basis to integrate your data. And we have this fourth job, or sorry, the fourth job is the one writing other jobs. The third job is the one that's generating the database output, or if you don't want OpenFunction to actually touch your database, it might just output a SQL script that you can then copy and run on your own database whenever you please. So those are the first kind of 4 jobs where we plug information into one, and then we get outputs in 3 and 4. And there is this 5th one that we talked a little bit about on Monday, which we're going to play around with a little bit today. But this 5th one is like, great, now you have your infrastructure set up, you have your database, you have your OpenFunction job to map data. Now let's actually go get some data to run through those new jobs that we just auto-created. And so that's where you'll see that fetch job. So I know Remy specifically had some questions around some of these jobs where we get data out of Kobo. So we're going to take a look at a couple other ones today, just to see what those look like. And so that's what we'll be focusing on a bit more, is that how do we fetch data in different ways, and then let's actually run it through these automated jobs. Awesome. So I'm going to switch back to OpenFunction. If you all have that form, and if you want to go ahead and drop me your little key, we'll have these, or drop in the chat, we'll have that kind of form UID, prefix 1, prefix 2, table name. And I'm wondering, does anyone want to share their screen and kind of maybe walk through this process with the group? We'll be here to support. You got lots of backup.
So
sure, I don't mind giving that a go. I mean, it might be very clunky though. I do just warn you.
Wonderful. Let's do it.
I won't do myself any favors in this process, I don't think.
I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And then
I've got a dual monitor, so I just have to make sure that it. Okay. Gosh, which one am I? Okay, desktop 2 by the looks of things. Okay. Oh, I've got to set up the permission in the preferences. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay.
Well, while James doing that, I'll quickly chat that.
I would have to quit out of Zoom and come back in again. Is that okay?
Yeah, if you want to do that, I'll drop that syntax in for folks. So what we want to do, if y'all remember, we want to grab that form UID. We want to think about our prefixes for these tables that we're going to create. So as a default, we recommend kind of maybe your organization name, your form type, kind of ways you want to group the data, and your main table name. So if you want to just give that a go to start, then we can just start to see the different forms and tables that are there. And your form ID, you should be able to grab that from the URL of the form. So holler if you have any questions there, but hoping to see some form UID combinations here in the chat.
Okay. Has that worked?
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, let me just, sorry, I had that other one over there. Okay.
Awesome. So James, do you want to maybe, let's start by opening up that first job in that ConSoSci training project.
This one.
Yep. Awesome. And if you click the little edit icon on the top right, that opens up this job editor view for you. So if you scroll down, you'll see it's a little slow to load your side.
Should there be something in this box down here? There shouldn't there?
Yeah, it looks like it's
right.
not loading.
It didn't load earlier when I tried this. Is it a browser issue? I'm using Safari.
I hope not. Can you try one thing for me? See the little pastel icon on the right, the little paint board? Yeah, try picking a different background. So for those of you that like to interact with OpenFunction. Yeah, James, I do wonder if this is a browser thing. Interesting.
I can. Well, okay. This weird enough. This partition here is in Firefox.
Okay, that should work, and I'll definitely chat the team. Rita, maybe we can grab a quick screenshot of that.
Yeah, let me just sort of, I haven't got, I don't use it, so I will just open function, and then at least, well, it will be a test, right, to see whether or not that is the it was, how do I pull up the chat?
All right, I see Charlotte's dropped a form ID and a prefix and a table ID. Any others? Remy, do you have a form to sync?
I'll just watch this one first, and then I'll
Okay.
go maybe later.
If I stop sharing my screen, how do I?
At the bottom, there should be an option to like share screen or pause screen.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No, that's sorry about that on our side, not making sure that works. No, but thanks for that. We'll kick that to our product team, so they'll get on that. So you should be able to access that, no problem, I'm sure, by tomorrow.
Can you remind me where to find the form ID?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'll share my screen while James is sorting that out. It's in the URL here. So if you see my screen, I'm looking at Kobo Toolbox. And when you click into a form, each form has this unique ID assigned to it. So that's the quickest way to grab it is from the URL. A lot of times we might also see it in the actual form extract that we pull. If you're also downloading to XLS, that will be the name of the file when you download it to XLS. But that's that unique instance of this form. So in that way too, you might have 10 forms all called sharks and rays, but each time you upload it, that's the separate instance. And so even if they have the same name, that's fine. This unique ID is what we care about.
Okay, great. And we should be sharing the form with the WCS training account. And which permissions are the minimal permissions that we need to give?
I believe it's view form is what we need just to extract
view.
this. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, just so you know, yeah, it works fine in Firefox. It looks like it might be a browser issue.
All right. Well, I will definitely let the team know about that. So thanks for doing a bit of discovery today. Cool. Well, I stopped sharing if you want to share yours on your side.
Quick question, sorry. What exactly is the username again for the WCS training account?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me drop it in the chat. It's WCS_training.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Great. So James, it looks like now you're in this edit view of your job. And just to orient you a little bit to what you're looking at, when you click edit on a job, it starts to break down the anatomy of the job for you. You can see in that one, it's saying give your job a name. Then in 2, you can see what triggers this job to run. So if you click on 2, we can see that this job currently is set up to run on this timer for every 3 hours, but we can add a different trigger to run every day, every hour, every minute. That's where you can choose to have your different triggers, or you might also have a trigger that's event-based. So based on when a certain form comes in. So that's some of those other ones that you see on your screen, like when a new Shark submissions come in, things like that. But usually for these jobs where we're getting data, we're running it on a timer, and a timer allows us to schedule it or just to run things on demand as well. But then we have an API adapter. In this case, we're sending HTTP requests to pull information from Kobo, so we're using that adapter. But when we're connecting with the database, we might be using that database-specific adapter. But if you take a look there's lots of other adapter options if you all are using other systems, such as if MongoDB, other database systems, MySQL. If you're using, I think like Comcare is another one up there, Google Sheets, another option too, if you wanted to quickly route Kobo data to Google Sheets. So a bunch of different options that you can choose from. but we're going to stick with HTTP. So you can just click out of that or click on HTTP, either one. And then authentication details. So right now for this training, we're hooked up to this WCS training account. But if you wanted to connect this to your own project, you can connect it to your own Kobo account that would have access to those different forms. And so that's just what we're using here. The default, totally free for y'all to play, but you could be adding your own credentials. And just a quick note about credentials is that if you add a credential, you have the option to choose which projects you share it with. And when you share it with a project, it means that these creds can be used in jobs. So other people that might have access to your project can also connect with your Kobo account if you choose to do that, but they can't actually see the credential details. They can't actually see the username and password, so they can't go and run that currently. So Matthias, we're on job A1. I said A exclamation point, A1. Great, and then here I can see that we have this different form list. And so there's this view here, and also, James, if you want, there's that little square icon if you want to get this into full screen. Awesome. And what we're dealing with is just the forms list. So if you see there right on line 8, this is the section that we're updating. And there's some other comments in here just to like give you a sense of, you know, what other folks are doing. But if you want, James, what we can do is we can copy that line 10 and we can just plug in your form specific information. So if you just want to copy that and paste that to the next line. Awesome. And James, how does your form look? No special characters, it's deployed, all that good stuff? Looks good.
James, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. I was going to say it's got a special character. It's got an underscore version. It's got an underscore version 9.
Okay, awesome. So maybe let's get rid of that underscore. So if you go back to that form.
Oh, where have I gone? Oh, I'm actually. Can I do it from your shared account, from the WCS shared account, or should I be in my own Kobo toolbox?
It depends on what permissions you gave. If you go ahead and try editing the name here, just at the top. See the
current version.
Is underscore considered as a special character?
I actually don't think it is, but
Yeah.
I 100%
Yeah,
don't remember
I
off the top of my head. I think it's more periods and comments. But James, let's just see if you can edit it there. If not, we'll give it a try. Just
be able to edit
next to the
directly.
rocket. If you click on the name.
Edit in form builder? No.
Yep, that works too. You can do that there.
Okay. So I think it should work. I think I gave permissions for the first few.
I think underscores are fine because that's very Postgres friendly.
Okay.
Like databases have underscores all the time. I think it's more the periods and stuff like that we want to be wary of.
Right. Okay. Okay, but now I need to redeploy it. Okay. Well, I changed it anyway, just in case.
Awesome.
Okay.
Cool. So we'll grab that form ID. And you notice even when you change the form name, the ID stays the same.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like your unique instance. So even if you're going through and changing a bunch of form names, that's fine.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, you can pick maybe your organization, or if you want to keep it ConSoSci, that works too.
Table ID, and then the table ID, can that be unique? I mean, does it have to match the form, or can it be anything you would like it to be?
It can be anything you like it to be. So I would recommend thinking about like, what do you want that's your main table where all this data is going. So what makes sense for whoever is accessing that database?
I would say maybe
farmer. Awesome.
farmer surveys, and
Yeah.
then table.
No, I mean, it is a table. You can call it a table if that's helpful.
Okay.
But if you're in your database, I think that looks great. So one thing is you'll see in the job editor, you see a little red X. It's telling you something. All the way on the left, it's giving us, and it looks like there's some little syntax thing going on, and I think there's a comma missing after 10. So if we're listing a bunch of forms, we just want to make sure we add some commas. So if you wouldn't mind just adding a comma at the end of line 10, I'm pretty sure that will make that little red X go away.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yep, there we go. Awesome, looks good. And if you ever misentered anything or you get an error, that's fine. You can always come back here. You can re-edit this and run it again. Nothing will completely fall apart. So if you go ahead and just click save. Now, how do we run this job, James? Do you remember?
Press that little run button up there.
Yeah, exactly. Press play. Awesome. Cool. And we can get that little notification. And where do we go to see the success of different job runs?
Was it the inbox or the activity history? Activity history.
Yeah, activity history, exactly. Awesome. And it looks like we're already running here.
So is that now flowing through the whole workflow that's kind of in place?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And it looks like maybe some other folks are also clicking this and running this at the same time. I'm seeing a few different runs. But do you want to go ahead and
there's no actual data associated with this form yet, of course.
Nope. And if you remember, we're just creating the infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not going through and we're not mapping the data yet. We're just trying to get this database set up and then get the job set up so that way we can start to connect data through it.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Well, maybe you want to click into that A4. We'll see if that was your run or if that was someone else's run. So that second row, yeah, you just click on that. We can see the result of that. So that looks like the Sharks and Rays demo table. So I think that was the form that I had in there. So if you go back to activity history, that was that one I had above you. And then maybe check out on
256. Would it have been that one? Get form succeeded.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and click into that. I'm not sure if that's the same one we just clicked into. There we go.
Yeah,
awesome.
farm service. Yeah.
So what is this telling you here? Any guesses?
It worked without errors. Time, how long it took.
And what did it do?
Oh, it got the kind of structure of the form. It got the form structure from Kobo.
Exactly. And there's an output, if you remember. And so on line 7, it's telling you what just happened. So what it did is it inserted or it inserted or updated an open function job with that name, if you see on line 7. So this job just went and created a job that you can start to use to sync that. So if you see on line 7,
yeah.
if you just copy that auto Smithsonian,
just that part.
Yeah, that's the name of the job. And if you go to jobs, let's go actually look at it.
So would it be an A? Is that an A4?
No, it's going to create a new one with that name, auto, whatever. So there's a search bar in the top if you just want to paste that in, or you can scroll down. Either one works. And see there's your job. It was just created at 2:56.
Yeah.
And if you click into that, we can check out what open function generated for you.
Okay.
And so we can see that this, if we kind of look at the job from top to bottom, that trigger is mapping to that job's table ID, and see what type of actions are going on here. Yeah,
so it's entering all of the names and not the labels, but all of the form structure is going there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it looks like you have a fairly flat form, hey? Not a lot of repeat groups going on. So just a long list of questions. So it looks like it's going to have this one table outputted with lots of different columns on that table.
I mean, some of those are kind of, you answer it yes or no prior to the previous question, but that doesn't create any structure within the form, does it? That sort of goes down flat.
So by default, it would map that automatically. So it would record if someone said yes or no. If there was no response, that column would just be blank in the database. It would just be undefined.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But a quick trick for if you wanted to make the slightest little change, if you edit this job, I'll show you something. If you scroll the way up and edit. There's a little trick where, let's say if you scroll down a little bit, and let's say, for example, risk 1, you did not want to map that to your database for whatever reason. If you you can either remove it, or you can add just 2 slashes to the start of that line. And it comments it out. And so what that means is, when this is like a very common coding thing, and it'll leave that for you for reference, but when the job runs, it's going to skip that line.
Okay. Yeah.
So
that will then mean that risk 1 would not be brought into the final database once everything was kind of put together and flowing properly.
Exactly. And so if you wanted to add it back in, you can just remove those 2 backslashes, and then that will be there, and it'll be mapping your data. So this is the job that you created automatically without any code. You just plugged in the ID, and now you have an integration script. So that's exciting. Anyone have questions here on the jobs that are auto-created?
Out of interest, where is the code that auto creates this job?
That's in those A jobs. So those A jobs, they're doing all the work. So you plug into A1. A2 is thinking and it's analyzing the form. A3 is that's the run that you were looking at to say, hey, what did that job do? And it outputted something. So I think we were looking at A4 because it outputted that job. But then if we go back to activity history and we look at the output of A3, we can probably see the SQL script generated.
So this is okay. Yeah. Okay. So A4 is A1. Where are we?
It's a little easier when it's just you and your account. But if you go to 256, I think that's the ones that you were working with.
Yeah. So 256. It was A1 initially.
Yep. And then A3.
And then the A3. Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Awesome. So if we scroll down here, it looks like this is a sharks and rays table that we're dealing with. But if you go scroll all the way to the top, there's an arrow, and you can also flip through runs in this way. So see top right? Yes. So if we keep flipping through runs, it looks like, we have an MPH survey. We might be going in the wrong direction, James, but it looks like we got some WWF surveys coming in, which is great. So if we go the other direction, James, a fun little dance to the left. Cool. There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome. So have you interacted with SQL before?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Well, Matthias, no problem. Glad you're generating forms in SQL scripts. But here, SQL is that database language, if you remember. And if you're ever working with databases, even if you're not super familiar with it, there are a couple like apps you can use to interact with a database system. I can add some links to kind of our key sites to work on that. So if you are able to install a database, there's kind of like a click and point view that you can do to access that database and see the columns and tables. There's one that I really like called dbeaver that I'll drop in the chat. There's some other ones called like PG admin and stuff like that, but they're these open source tools that allow you to like just click around a database and view the data. But when you have a SQL database, you can run these scripts to either change the database configuration or to change the data or to query data as well. So this is like the whole language we use. And so if you set up a database, or if you're working with someone on your team that has a database set up, you can then copy the different SQL scripts and you can be running that on the database setup yourself. And so in this job, we're automatically connecting to a database behind the scenes. And so we're already like creating these tables. But what you could do is just choose to output only the script that you can copy and paste and just hand off to your DB admin, or just run it yourself on demand whenever you wanted. And then that way you also have this chance to here kind of change some of these names. Because if you see on line 19, what does it look like it's doing there?
Creating a list of columns with those headers?
Yeah, exactly. So it's creating this table, and on that table, there's all those different columns. And so usually how they SQL, it spits out, it shows you the column name and then the data type. So it's setting like all these risk ones as like a text or varchar. So I think like if it's a longer question, it's a text value, versus varchars tend to be like shorter responses as a default. It looks like there might be, I'm trying to see if there's anything else. There's some date fields at the bottom. If you had numbers, it might be calculating integers. I see some integers for cost. So this is a chance also for you if you wanted to change the data types in your database, like you can quickly change this before you're running it on your database to kind of spin that up.
Oh, right. So you can actually edit here how it's categorized. So then it will kind of like change it when it goes into its final, the database at the end. Okay, that's quite good.
Yeah, so two options. One is you let OpenFN edit the database for you, and that's what's happening here. And so you're seeing the result of that. You're saying, great, a table is created. Second option is there's one little setting you change before you run this whole thing. And then that's where it will not touch your database, but it will give you that nice script that you can then edit and then run in your database to then create it. And absolutely, that gives you that chance to change kind of the defaults. And so that way you can also, like, you know, if your tables are named slightly different, or if you want to rename the columns that in a way that's slightly different than your Kobo form, that gives you that chance to do that.
Can we maybe see what that looks like? You said there's a PostgreSQL account set up, right, for this?
Yeah. Let me chat Steve my latest IP address. There's some security stuff, and after the break, Steve, maybe you can help me out, and we can pull up that ConSoSci database, and we can show folks around.
Yep, cool. No problem.
Okay, awesome. Jesse, I'll help you out in a moment with that. But anyone else, any other quick questions? And I'll pull up that database for when we come back after the break. Awesome. Well, thanks, James, for sharing.
No worries. Thank you.
So Jesse, I see it looks like you're stuck. So let me just kind of walk you through that. If folks want to stop here and take a quick break, I'm going to just make sure that Jesse's kind of set up on getting the form run through. Cool. Well, it looks like we have most folks back. I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to show you all is that output of some of those jobs that we talked about, and just show you like what it looks like on the database side. So let me know when you can see my screen. Yep. But as you all know by now, when we run this form to the solution, we create metadata in that database. And then what we're about to walk through is syncing the actual data. And so there's two ways that metadata might be created. But that job A3, when we look at that, we can set that up to either actually go and make changes in the database, or it might just generate a SQL script that you can then go and run yourself in the database. So if I go back to the OpenFN project, and if I go to activity history, if you remember, we just had a few people run different forms. So if I click into some of these A3 jobs, I can see, for example, we had Jesse's form. We created this ConSoSci fish landing table in that database. If I go back and I look at another one, it looks like there's another fish landing. I'll go to the next page. I think we have this WWF. I think Matthias, that's you, with the MPAH survey. We had James's survey as well. So I'm gonna, let me know, can you see my screen now, this dbeaver?
Yep.
Awesome. So this is a nice open source application for providing you a point and click interface for managing different databases. So you can see here I have like a few different like staging test databases on the left, but I have this one Postgres one set up for this ConSoSci. And this is what we use when we like want to automatically generate tables in the database. We automatically create them here. So if I'm looking in my database at the list of tables, I can see fish landing. And if I click on that, it'll open up, it'll show me the data. There's no data because we haven't synced data yet. But if I flip over to properties, these were the questions in Jesse's form. So if I scroll down, I know we had some Smithsonian ones, so that should be next. There's that Smithsonian Ag Farmer Surveys. If I click open that one. James, do these columns look familiar?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So here you go. Here's your database. So if you got that initial system, that initial database, just set up and deployed somewhere, like running on a cloud server or on locally on your computer or something, and then you connected OpenFN to this and chose the SQL to execute automatically, you don't have to touch the database. You can kind of open it up and there you go. You'll have your tables there with your different columns. But the nice thing about a tool like dbeaver is it allows you to like point and click and make changes to things. But what you can also do is you can open up a Sql editor. And this is where you might like write an actual script or copy and paste the script that OpenFN creates for you. And so that's where you can be pasting in those scripts, run it, and it'll make changes to your database. So there's lots of online resources out there around SQL and things like that. But what OpenFN is doing is essentially it's opening up the SQL and it's executing these scripts for you to then generate these outputs. And then Matthias, I think WWF is what your form, is that right? Yeah, so I see it looks like we got a few tables for yours. We have this kind of master table for your form. And then, yeah, tell us about your Kobo form. What are you collecting in this form?
Yeah, it's we're collecting just social monitoring data through a household survey in villages that are either inside or outside of a marine protected area, an MPA. We've collected these data for over 10 years now. So what we've done typically is collect them in paper forms and then have that manually entered in like Access. And then we go in R and like manipulate the data, calculate our indices, and then push it to like our final Access database. So just being able to integrate this with Kobo, even though that this maybe wouldn't be the final data that we would want in our database, is still like very convenient and save a lot of time.
Awesome. And then, yeah, I imagine probably maybe easier here to run some scripts and get what you need and load it into another system or maybe even
exactly.
OpenFN to do those connections for you.
Yeah, no, this is very cool. And I have a question. So with all of these different forms being integrated into, let's say, this PG admin account, or whichever one is this PostgreSQL, I see. So I imagine that another way that it could have potentially been structured is that like each form has its own database with its own set of tables. Is that how it is here, or is it like all like the WCS, the Smithsonian, the WF form tables are all kind of under the same PostgreSQL kind of layout?
Great
I
question.
may be like misunderstanding, but that's just how it looks to me, given like the list view that we're seeing on the left here.
So that's exactly what we're doing here, but that's not what you have to do. So here we are connecting to one Postgres database, and we're creating a number of tables within the schema in the database. So you might configure your database to have like different schemas, so like separate data models, but they still live on the same database instance. So for security reasons or just for like logistics reasons, if maybe certain forms you're mapping to your own database, you might have a job connecting directly to your own database. You might have a second job in parallel connecting also to another database or instead to another database for certain forms. And so it's just a matter for you to just determine, what destinations you want these to land. And then that's where, when you set up the job credentials, that's where you just want to define what database credentials you're pointing your system at. So if I go check out that job A3, for example, so this is pointing at this ConSoSci automation database. That's the one that I have up on my screen. You might instead choose to point it to a different database, or just spit out the SQL script. And so there's these write SQL execute options. So if you say don't execute, but yes, write the SQL, it will just generate that SQL script that then you can copy and paste and run on yourself in any database. So that decision point just comes down to whether you're executing the SQL automatically and then what systems you're pointing the job at.
Okay, no, that's clear. Thank you.
Yeah, and one other thing just to flag on that, right now this solution is set up and running for Postgres specifically, but there's also like other adapters. So I know with WCS, like MS SQL is another common database. There are other database options out there. Do you know, Matthias, what you all use?
We use PostgreSQL.
Okay, yeah, that's the most popular one. Theoretically, there's also MongoDB and some other database types. This solution could be extended to work with those other database types, but right now, it is very much targeting PostgreSQL. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, is depending on what these systems are, just making sure, are they in Postgres or is there some other database? And then we might need to talk about like what that compatibility switches might need to look like.
Sure, yeah. And I have another question. So if we were to say delete a row from Kobo Toolbox, would it, I know you just said that as a default, OpenFN tries not to delete any data, which is understandable. But if we were to delete a row, say, because it was just kind of a testing row, would it also update through OpenFN and that deleted row be then deleted in the Postgres database?
No, so as the solution default, OpenFunction doesn't do any deleting. So if you delete either a column, so let's say you delete a question in your forms, like what you're asking someone, you might then want to delete the corresponding column in the database if you're not interested in that historical data anymore. Or if you delete a row of data, so like a test submission, you would then want to come to the database and delete that data as well. Theoretically, it would be possible to extend the solution to maybe look at that. It's not as straightforward because Kobo doesn't tell us when data has been deleted per se. But you could imagine some sort of scenario where you were like comparing the two. But as a default, we recommend the folks that, if you're deleting data, making sure to do that, all the way upstream as well as downstream.
Okay, great. Thank you. That makes sense.
Awesome. So any other questions? Because otherwise, I say let's go maybe fill up some of these data tables. Awesome. So when we've created these auto jobs, if you all want to do this with me, and if you want to find your job, then what we can do is we can just make sure some of this data is syncing. But if, for example, if I click into a job, this is one of these auto jobs that were automatically created, you can see that by default it's off. So if you want this job to be listening for new data coming in, you might switch it on. So that way it starts to auto process new data coming in. But you also might want to make sure that it's connected to this database that we're syncing with now. So since you all have access, your administrators on this project, if you edit your auto job that was created, if you were in the full screen view, you'll get this view, and you can see there's like this different credential option drop down, but you might also want to go back to the collapsed view and exit the full screen. It's just your choice. And there's this authentication details drop down there, and you can pick the ConSoSci automation database. You'll see if you try to click into that, you won't be able to get the details, but you can still link your job to this credential. And what that will ensure is that as we run data through this job to process data, it's going to map to this database that I just had up on my screen. So, you know, James, Matthias, Jesse, if you want to go ahead and add this credential to that job, we can give this a go, and then just be sure to switch it on. So that way this job is listening for new submissions coming in. So anyone have any quick questions on that? That's the next step, turning it on, adding a credential. So what system you're syncing it to.
Would the credentials here be for a Postgres database or our Kobo account?
For the database. So what we're doing is we are this job, if you take a look at it, it's performing operations on these tables. So this job is pointing data into the database. So this is a load job. What we'll do is we'll go extract the data. But first, we just want to make sure the load job is ready and active to receive that data.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to see this live, I recommend if you point your job to the ConSoSci automation, I can pull up the database and we can take a look. If you wanted to test this with another database setup, you know, after the training, you can like plug in your own database credentials. Of course, you want to make sure that the SQL, the configuration you just generated is there to capture it. But you can try plugging in your own Postgres credentials if you wanted to give that a try. Awesome. So I have my job on. I have my credentials set. I can see that this job is going to run anytime some data comes in that has this keyword pair in it. So it has this key value pair table ID with ConSoSci raised demo table. Then I know that this job is going to run, and it's going to process the data following this script here. And so it's performing a set of operations in different tables in my database. And does anyone remember what upsert means? It's kind of a funny word.
Is it just literally like uploading and inserting? So like get the data, bring it to your database and insert it into the database table?
Yeah, nearly. It's uploading, and it's a combination of the word update and insert. And so what it does is it checks if a record is there already using some sort of identifier. And then if it's already there, it's going to update that record. If not, it's going to insert that record. So update and insert, upsert. This is a pattern that we really like when we talk about integration, because it allows us to resync data repeatedly if we need to, and we don't need to worry about duplicate records being created, or if we're refreshing data to get the latest and the cleanest data from Kobo, we can ensure that rows in our database are going to be updated rather than duplicate rows added. So we're going to talk a lot more about jobs in the coming sessions if y'all are sticking around. But you'll see by default, this is our preferred operation. Other operations might just be a plain old insert, a plain old update. There's a few other ones that we might be dealing with, but you'll see for all of these tables, they have this unique ID assigned to these different tables. And so that basically maps your submission ID to this table, and so it'll insert a row, and if you ran this job again on that same set of data, it'll just refresh that data rather than inserting new records. So we'll talk a lot more about unique IDs. I don't think we'll get to it today, so definitely the next session. And there's some nice documentation on the site. But any quick questions on upserts? Cool. So we defined our job. We're giving OpenFN instructions. So hey, when this data comes in that has this table ID, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy this table ID, and I'll show you why later. But if you all want to do the same, this is the destination that we're pointing the data to, and we've created that job. The job is on. Now what we might want to do is we want to go fetch that data. And so to fetch data, we can just go to that job A5, which is all set up nicely for you. But there are a couple different fetch job options. So Remy, you brought up a historical job option to bring in all-time data versus fetch forms just for maybe after a specific date or something like that, or only the most recent ones. So I'm going to look at job A5 right now, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the different fetch jobs. But you have different options. Am I only pulling the most recent data, or am I pulling all data ever submitted for a form? So I'm going to click into this A5 job, and this is fetching data from Kobo. So now that I have my other job, the auto job listening and ready to load, I want to extract. And if you can see here, it's kind of a similar setup. If we scroll down, where we're specifying a form ID, and you'll see there's that table ID. We're saying, where do we want to map this data to? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into this A5, and I'm just going to open up full screen because it's a little easier to see. And similar to the other job, I'm just going to paste that table ID I had before because I want to use that later. But I'm just going to copy this whole section that I already see in there, paste that again. And I just want to say, what form I want to sync the data for. So again, we did that metadata sync. Now I want to actually sync the data. So I see rows in my database. So I'm going to replace that table ID. I'm fine with these names. My form name might have been demo owner. If I go back to my Kobo project, again, I'm just pulling that same unique ID from the form. It's the same type of process, but this time we're mapping data rather than metadata. And you'll see here that there's a chance to specify form type and form name and owner. This isn't required, but if you all can still see my screen on the database, by default, OpenFN is going to create this master Kobo dataset table for you all. And this is like your catalog of all forms that have been synced through your database. And what this catalog table has is that it captures like the different form names, the actual ID of where it sits on Kobo, when it was last updated, as well as kind of the full submission in a raw JSON format in case you ever wanted to export that and use it elsewhere. So just for cataloging purposes, you might also choose to add some additional metadata that you might want to capture there, such as form type, form name, and owner. And again, that's all that we can see on that Kobo page. So I can see, okay, I have these different form names. Maybe it's important to me to capture the owner, so maybe I want to include that. Maybe I also want to include form type, because remember, you might have form names that are different. So I might have this one form that's demo version 1, and then I have the second form that's demo version 2, but they're both the same type of form. They're both Sharks and Rays surveys. They're just different, unique surveys that belong to the same type of survey. So form type allows us just to group that. And then form name is like the very specific name if I wanted to go find it on my Kobo server, what I should be looking for. But here we're doing the same process where we're specifying the UID. we want to specify, in this case, the table ID. So where we mapping the data, and then we can choose to add this other metadata here. So I'm gonna drop this in the chat. Does anyone want to chat me back maybe some other forms that we can pull data from? And I think with that, if you all are wanting to pull data, make sure you have data in your form that we can pull from. So if you haven't shared submissions, Mr. Matthias, I'm not sure we'll be able to pull data for yours. But if you wanted to quickly add data, so Jesse, it doesn't look like you have any submissions for yours. If you go to click into Fish Landing, there's this collect data section here at the bottom. And then if we collect and we choose open, we can go through and you can quickly fill out a submission. So does anyone have a form that does have data that we want to maybe pull in?
I just added, I just submitted a form, or I guess data to the form that's already linked to the WCS training account.
Awesome. So that's that. Is it this Wakatobi one?
Yeah, it's that very long one.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure we can see data. Okay, cool. Yeah, I see a submission. So do you want to chat me maybe your form IDs and we can plug that in?
Sure, one sec.
Anyone else have a form with data?
Yeah,
I'm filling out a row of data, but it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, it takes a while sometimes with these forms, hey?
I just added a form. You should have some data in there.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Dan.
The information that's in the brackets that others have sent in the chat, is that pre-populated anywhere, or would we have to manually enter it?
So you'd have to, this is the one step that you need to enter.
Right.
And so this is because you're defining, what form specifically we should pull data from, and you're kind of like tagging it with some additional metadata.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, hey, I also want to make sure that the form is labeled this way, all that good stuff.
But does any of that metadata have to match any of the existing kind of names from Kobo?
So it's intended to be a reference for you. So like if you're looking at your database only and you're like, what forms have I synced? I might go to this Kobo data set table, and then I can see a history of all forms that I've synced. And so if these names just mismatch from what you see in Kobo, you're like, I can't find this form, but you do have that ID as well to look it up. So it's just a way like for a data manager just to understand exactly what's in Kobo and what's been synced here, and just to catalog it.
Okay, thanks.
But the only things that are really important are the form ID and the table ID, because that's the source and then the destination. Awesome. It looks like Zoom does some weird things to the dashes, apostrophes. And so while folks are chatting this, remember that this job is set up to run on what we call a cursor. So if you see these fetch jobs have this cursor, that's kind of like that time bookmark of, hey, extract any data after this certain date. So you can add a cursor to these get jobs to just say only from this point onwards pull data, but you can also easily comment things out. if you didn't want to pull all that data. Or there's some jobs that are already set up in a way, like these historical jobs are pretty much the same jobs, but they just don't have that cursor in it. And that allows you to pull all time data. But a lot of times with these jobs, particularly if we're setting it to run on a timer, it's nice to have that cursor where we're saying, okay, great, like let's pull this data after a certain date, or let's dynamically update this cursor so that way every 3 hours we only look for data that was created or updated in the last 3 hours. So that's just if you're clicking around and you see like historical jobs versus these other jobs, that's what that cursor is. It's like, are you telling OpenFunction when to start checking, or are you just saying go find me all of the submissions for this form? Remy, any questions from your side there?
I guess that sounds good. I just had one question with regard to, let's say if you've made changes to the form, maybe it should have come a bit earlier, the question, but you're saying that AppSat function, it updates and inserts. Does it also include an additional column for the question, or is that something different? And if there's a column that will be included for an additional question, will there be zeros, NAs, or will it just be blank?
Yeah, good question. So what it will do is if you run that form through that job A1, so that job A1 was the one that was pulling that form definition. So if you just clicked play, or if you have that A1 set up on a timer to check for when you were changing the actual form, the actual metadata, and if OpenFunction says, it looks like Remy added a new question, what it will do is it will update that SQL script or that database itself and add a new column for that new question. And it will also update that job if that job lives in that same project to then add that question mapping to the job. So it would add on columns to your database. It would just not remove that question if that question replaced something else. So if you had, let's say you were capturing what is today's date, and then you decided to remove that question and rather what is the year, you're going to end up having both what is the date and what is the year in your database, because OpenFunction never deletes, but it will add. So you can ensure that those form changes are captured going forward.
Okay, and if there's an additional column and there's data that has been brought into the database and that question wasn't there before, what is written? What is on those rows, or what is indicated there? Like, so is it blank or there's?
Yeah, exactly. It's just an undefined column. So you might have like a table with like the first 5 rows don't have any information for this new question, but data going forward would. So then what you might do is, okay, do I need to go collect that data to fill in that column for these first 5 rows? And then, it's just a question, do I do that on the Kobo side? Do I do that on the database side? And I think it's just a little bit up to kind of whose job it is to go and collect that data historically.
Okay, great. I think you've answered the question about also the historical databases. Yes, so I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, I have a couple more here. So I think it's Diane's, and then James, this is yours. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. And Matthias, feel free to run yours, add yours on later as well. But after I save this, looks like I have 3 different forms that I want to go fetch data from. And what I can do is I can choose to just click this play button here. Go over to activity history. And I just want to make sure that that worked fine. So sometimes remember it takes a moment if there's lots of different submissions going on before it'll run, because it's going to the Kobo server and it's checking for that data. And so activity history just lets me know if that request is successful or not. But also inbox is somewhere I can go to look, because we're getting data and it might start loading that data here into my inbox. So I'm going to go back to activity history. And I'm going to clear my filters here. Oh, looks like I had 1 success. before. Okay, cool. And then it looks like we also had one error here. So let's take a look at this one error. Detail not found. So I wonder if maybe one of the forms that I was pulling data from maybe didn't actually have submissions for. So let me go back and check out my job there. I think all these IDs are right. Do I have data? Oh yes, I might have also forgotten a step too. So remember how I said this job has that cursor? So when I run it, and I had been running this before the training, it adds like this new timestamp. So it's like incrementally looking for submissions. So if you ever wanted to clear that cursor and just like fetch all form submissions, what you can do is next to that play button, there's a little trash can. And what that's going to do is just going to like clear that last bookmark. And then you can see there's no previously saved state, so it's not bookmarking anything for me. And I can just click run. And then if I go back to that activity history, all right. So it looks like I both got some submissions as well as got some errors. So I'm able to get data, it looks like, for my 2 sharks and rays form. But I'm still getting some errors, and I wonder if everyone shared their form and shared their form data, because I'm getting this 404 data not found. So has everyone shared their form properly? Because if I go to my inbox here, I see I just got 2 submissions for the sharks and rays table here. And I can see the data here, but I am getting errors on these couple other ones. So let's check out your all's permissions on some of these Kobo forms. Do y'all remember how you shared those forms? Like Diane, do you remember with yours as well?
I think I shared C submission and C form.
Okay, let me make sure I'm connected to the right Kobo account. C submission and C form.
Yeah, I've got view form, edit form, view submissions.
Okay, so that should work fine.
I just hope I entered the data correctly.
No, that should be fine. And I see it here in Kobo too. So let me just try one more thing. I just want to do maybe just one at a time for a second, just to see. All right, so Diane, this is yours, is that right? I'm gonna run it again. I'm getting this data not found. Huh. I wonder, hold on guys, I think we might have this manual cursor messing some things up here with this.
Well, no, yeah, that's my fault for some reason. There is no, I probably didn't share the right form. There is 0 submission now.
There are 0 submissions? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Gotcha. No worries. Let's try the next form. So that's a good thing, is like, you know, if you get an error, sometimes those logs are a little verbose, but if you read it, they'll tend to tell you what it is. And usually if you see some sort of like 404 error, and we'll talk a little bit more about troubleshooting, there's something wrong with like authentication or access usually. So let's try out, Matthias, let's try out your form here and see what luck we have. Oh, man, I just deleted the cursor from the job, and this job's supposed to have a cursor. All right, let me add that back in. I'm going to run the job. And so remember,
Sorry, I had put only view form. So that's interesting because when you put only view form, it looks like you have 0 submission when actually you do have them, but you just can't see it. So I'll change that and try to run it again.
Okay, cool. And meanwhile, I will run Matthias's. And looks like we got a success. Okay. It looks like we got 1 submission from this MPA household survey. So if I go back to my inbox, I hope to see that there. And voila, it looks like this submission came in. If I click into the message body, Matthias, is this your submission for Gabriella?
Yep.
Awesome. So we
That's
can
right.
see how you fill things out. And it doesn't look like your job was turned on. Is that right?
That is right. I forgot to do that.
No worries. So what we can do is we can run it manually now. So if I just click play next to this, we'll get some sort of error. And I bet we don't have credentials linked to this job either. So just remember that with the jobs, we want to make sure we set those credentials and turn on that job for it to run automatically. So Matthias, if you add credentials and link it to the ConSoSci account and turn it on, if you want to give that a try, you can go back to your message and you can just like click run again. And it should just load that data into the database. We can go check it out. And so while you do that, let me go sync a couple of these other forms really quickly. And I know we're at time, folks, so if you have to jump off, we can certainly kind of close the loop at the next session. So Diane, you said you added some backend, is that right?
Yeah, so I've changed the sharing settings to view the submissions. I've rerun the first job, now trying to turn on the auto job for the training evaluation.
Awesome. And James, your form is shared too, right? So I'm going to add yours back.
Yeah. It's shared. It's turned on.
Okay, cool.
Should hopefully be.
Awesome. So let's give this a go with Diane and James's form. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click play. Tells me run's been queued. I can go to activities history to check that out. Zero submissions. I don't think I cleared the state again, man. So I need to go back to that 5. So again, this is just for the jobs that are running with that incremental sync, where there is this other job that you can do all-time submissions. So if you're like, weird, I'm not getting submissions. So if I let me clear the state and let me now run this. So it's gonna say, it's gonna look for all time. It's not gonna look only after that certain time. So see now the next time it runs, it's only gonna look for that certain time. I'm gonna go back to activity history. And it looks like, oh, is that the right one? There we go.
Just to confirm the credentials, like the pre-existing ones, is it WCS_Kobo?
No, it's ConSoSci automation.
Automation. Okay, got it. Thank you. Just did it.
Cool. And so here's that A5 run that we just did, Diane and James. So it looks like we got, a few forms here. I'm not sure that was your run.
I think I just added one.
You added one too, Remy. Okay, cool. So there looks like there's a few of folks kind of adding ones here. Awesome. So there's that Kobo training evaluation. There's that aggro. But that's the one that we just did. Okay, so we might.
Okay, so that ran okay, did it?
Yes, but I think maybe James might have, or Jesse might have updated this right when we were running it as well. So that's the thing. If you have multiple folks updating this at once, you just want to be mindful of that, because I think they might have uploaded it at the same time. So just these jobs, let me add you guys back in, and I'm going to run it now. I'm going to clear state because I want to get all submissions, not just submissions from Jesse's last run. And I'm going to run this. and you all can play around with this. So you can share other Kobo forms to the Kobo account. You can add this thing, clear state, and you can just start pulling data into this training account if you want to try that out. So now I see this thing here. Still getting no submissions, it says. And Diane, what were the permissions you said?
So I changed it. I added view submissions, and I know there can be some lag between when you share the settings, but I'm in the WCS training Kobo account and I can see the 14 submissions. So that's weird that you don't have them.
Okay. Well, maybe we could try it again in a moment. Maybe there is some sort of lag. And James, let's maybe just double check your sharing. So if we click into a form, and there, I think it's usually here, right? Where it's the sharing option, share this project.
Yes, right. Okay, so let me open that up. Share this project. WCS training. Yeah, so the first 3 boxes are ticked. I mean, I can tick all of them if you like, or more.
What are the first 3 options that are
So the
ticked?
first one, it's a view form, like default. Then there's edit form. Then there's view submissions. And then you've got a sub menu, view submissions only from specific users. And then you've got add submissions, edit submissions, delete submissions, validate submissions, and then manage project is the final one. Okay,
so we have view submissions access is what it looks like?
Yeah, exactly. That's the top access, as it were, the kind of most detailed access. You've got view form, edit form, and view submissions.
Gotcha. I wonder if we need edit submissions. Do you mind just clicking that? This will be
Sure.
a good test.
Okay, so you've added, okay, I've added edit submissions now as well. That is updated.
Could it be because of the credential? I noticed I didn't change the credential on my automated job, so I just added it.
The credentials look good last time I checked. Where's the
we're just not even able to get the data out of Kobo. So before even running it through that job. So I think that's the thing, is like OpenFunction's going and it's taking these IDs and it's looking for, hey, are there any submissions for this training evaluation survey and for James's survey, the agro one? And that last run said it was successful, but no submissions were found. So usually that's interesting, because it looks like we can view the form, but we're not getting data from it. So just want to.
Although weirdly enough, on my submissions, it says that there've been no submissions in the past 7 days, but that the form was last modified at 2:54.
Oh, yeah, James, I don't know if you have data here.
Maybe I don't have data in mine. I went through I went through and I thought I submitted it, but maybe I did it wrong. Collect data.
Yeah, I'll show you on a form that there is data. We will see submissions, a submission count. So it looks like your submission count is 0.
No. Okay, so whatever I did it wrong. Aha.
And there will also be like a data tab. So I think when you click through this open, you have to go through all the way, and then there's like a submit button at the very end. Once you're done with the form, just make sure that's submitted.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe give that a go again. And then Diane, yours was the training evaluation, right? Is it this one, the Kobo 21?
Yes, it is. And I've just rerun the A5.
Interesting. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be getting data from that. Is there anything particularly interesting about this form in this account?
No, it's a very simple form, no group, nothing.
And the count, I see it's WCS library. Is there anything?
Yeah. No, it's the account that we've been using together for a while. The one from which I'm sharing I've shared the Arcadia form from there. So.
And how old are these submissions?
It was from the Kobo training, so the 30th of March, sorry.
Of March. Okay.
Yeah.
Of this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm looking at our job, and it looks like, you know, the baseline cursor set up that way. It has the incremental cursor. It looks like we, you know, we're pulling the IDs correctly. Everything looks good. So I'm going to try this one more time. If not, we might need to look into specifically what's going on with this one, because it seems like we're getting data for some of the other forms fine. Yeah, interesting. Because we're successfully connecting with the server, the API. Kobo just doesn't seem to be giving us back a submission response. So Diana, I'll take a look at that one and see what's up. But I'll be sure to also just like make sure we're clearly documenting what type of Kobo permissions you need. But I think, you know, at least from what we've seen and just even some of these other messages coming through, it looks like Jesse and Matthias are syncing some data through. You know, it's making sure that we have some sort of view of submission access and that there's actually data to sync. And there's no data to sync, then there'll be nothing there. Matthias, any luck with this job and getting that set up?
So I think I set it up. I added the credentials for ConSoSci automate, and I confirmed that I do have data in Kobo.
Yep.
So I don't know what else it could be.
And it looks like it ran properly. So it's saying it's preparing to insert, and it's about to upsert all this data here. And looks like we're even getting so far as the repeat group. So it looks like we successfully got, you know, we're inserting this first record here. And then it looks like here on the child table, it's hitting some sort of error, and it looks like it's maybe missing a certain column. So I'm just going to open up the database. Can you still see my screen?
Yep.
And so if we go to test survey, I can actually see that first record came in nicely. And so it inserted that first record. And then it looks like, I think it was the household members, right? Is that where it hit the error, it looks like? Yeah. So it looks like as it's preparing to add a record to this household members table, it's saying it can't find this column. So let's check out that table and see if maybe there's a bug in the automation. Do you have this up on your screen by chance? Do you know what that column name it says it can't find?
If you tell me the column name, then I can see it. Is it in PA survey UUID?
Yeah, it looks like that's it, and it's saying,
I think that's automatically generated by Kobo, if I'm not mistaken.
So
I didn't create any UUID column.
So this is supposed to be the column on this table that links this child table to the main survey table. So if you remember, I said that like there's supposed to be these relationships.
Sure, right, and this is a repeat group, so that would make sense. But I don't think this is a table that I manually created. No,
I think this is a bug actually.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm looking here, and I see these columns, and this was auto-generated, and I don't see that ID. So I'll check that out and get back to you. And then what we would do is we'd probably just rerun that job A1 to refresh this, and then we should see that data go through.
Okay, so cool.
So we'll just have to take a look at your form and see what's up. But yeah, I think the things with errors, just a tip, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is annoying as it sounds, read the screen. It's usually very verbose, but it is telling you what's going on. So it is nice to see that we were able to get some of this data there, and it looks like just something with these repeat group tables. Looks like that relationship is missing.
Yeah, I'm still happy that the data went through though, some of it at least.
Yeah, and I think it's probably just something going on with that repeat group logic, which is quite complex. So we'll just want to make sure we get that right to do that properly. I think our team was making some edits on that recently, so I wonder if something broke in that. Okay, Diane, any luck?
No, it's weird. The only thing I've noticed, and I tried downloading the XLS form, and for some reason there is some weird code added in the names of my metadata, the start and device ID. I don't think that would impact the job, but that's the only weird thing I could find.
We'll take a look at it, because I think that's interesting that it's connecting successfully, but it just can't find data for this form. So part of me does wonder if there's something permissions related going on. It doesn't look like it at a glance at a form level. Do you know, is there like any account user level type of permission set up?
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
so let me take a look at this one a little bit, and I'll get back to you and just kind of figure out what was going on there. But yeah, because I see the data here. It looks like you shared the form properly. You did all the steps right, and OpenFunction's connecting with it. It sees that form existed, just for whatever reason, it's not picking up data. So I'll get back to you, and we can share back with the group if there's any kind of interesting permission thing here going on.
I added data into my form and it looks like it's auto run, and it's auto run okay.
Yeah, all the way through.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, so there's James's run. So if we go back to the inbox, it looks like James synced his submission. It came in, his job was on. So if we click into that message, James, this is your submission. And then it looks like it ran there at the bottom at 6:16. So I'm going to go open the database. And if I pop and open that table, and I go to data, there we go. We see James's submission here on this table. And so that data flowing nicely. So James, if you submit more submissions, that's just going to keep adding data to this database.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Okay, excellent.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that's a good example there. So I will look into, Diane, your permissions thing, and we'll just be sure to communicate that with folks so it's super clear. And then Matthias, I'll look into that repeat group thing and see what's going on there. But hopefully it'll be as simple as, you've gone through this process, you've set up your database configuration, you've set up your form, then you go to a fetch job and you're saying, hey, OpenFunction, fetch data for this form, and you click run. It'll go into your inbox, and so long as you've set up those auto jobs to be on and to be pointing in the right place, it should automatically connect it and just pass through. And so that's what you see here. We've got a couple submissions from James just kind of going through. Yeah, hopefully it's just a matter of manipulating that job A and that job A5, and then you're good, and you have both infrastructure as well as an integration set up. So I know we're well over time, so I'll stick around for a couple more minutes if folks have questions, but thank you for joining. If you're going to be hanging around for the other sessions, we're going to get a lot more into how do we kind of customize from here, how do we build our own jobs. So hopefully starting to build your integration skills to do this from scratch.